Welcome to another Talking Technical. And the first request was from Ed. And Ed said to me, listen, Frans, can you maybe just explain something to me that when you've got a market that sees some corrections, there's suddenly certain shares that doesn't correspond. I mean, you can see maybe an Anglo-American lose 100 Rand or a Richmond losing 5 Rand, 20 Rand, whatever the case may be. He says, but then you get certain shares like, and he mentioned them to me. He mentioned PSG Consult. He said PSG and even Capitec, but Capitec, you will see now, did move back a little bit. But he asked me just to have a look technically what can take place if a correction takes place. And we know now that we've seen an ugly correction from, as you can remember, from about September all the way down to let's say late February, March, and then the market sort of recovered. But look at PSG Consult. And the big thing is, I said to him, listen, I'll look at the share technically, but there's something that you must always keep in mind, and that is we tend to forget that is liquidity. You sometimes get managers or directors that holding some of these stocks, and they get issued them maybe at a very reasonable price. When they join the company, they may be getting issued maybe at 8 Rand or 9 Rand or whatever the case may be. And then they just hold on to the share because they say that the share offers some value. But there's something interesting that I would like to tell Ed. Ed, when a market really starts to collapse, even those guys that keep the stocks, and they've got millions of them or 100,000 of them, they suddenly realize that stock is starting to come under pressure. And then you can see that stock suddenly coming down. Now, what we see here with PSG Consult, first of all, we see that triple top here. And what I want to show you is, look at this trend line. And this is now, of course, a weekly chart. Look at this beautiful trend line that supported the stock. And the stock is at the moment, you can almost say, testing this line to make up its mind. Either it's going to turn back into a support or it's going to turn into resistance. Now, the big thing is, if you look at PSG Consult here, I want to show you something. Apart from this trend line that you're seeing being tested, I'm seeing an ugly head and shoulder formation. Look at it. There's the left shoulder, there's the head, and there's the right shoulder. And the big thing that I want to say to you, even if you cannot understand why the stock does not drop, it shows you early signs that there's something on the boil here. And this head and shoulder formation makes me a little bit worried, because the moment this stock gets below 9.60 Rand, it can suddenly lose a lot of momentum. And the stock, and there's the projection from the top, from the head to the neckline, and if I project it down, it can maybe go as low as 8.70 Rand. So what I want to say to you, when a stock rallies against the trend, it can do that for quite a long time, and you can say to yourself, it's almost unbelievable. But you get to a point where you get a warning formation, and then even from there a drop in price. Let's maybe just have a look at PSG, because that's a stock in the same camp. And let's have a look here, and you will see now PSG, almost the same story. But what happens? You get to a point, and that's where I want to show you. Look at it. There's the stock, had a beautiful rally, and suddenly you see a triple top looming here on a weekly chart. There's a top, there's a top, there's another top. And if I look at the trend line again, there you are. And it's supporting that trend line at the moment. But the moment it gets below 223.60, it can actually go all the way down to test this line to confirm either the triple top or bounce from there. So what it tells us is, even if you think that the stock can just carry on forever, that's not true. What will happen is, eventually the stock will collapse or rise under market pressure or market support. Now, let's go to Capitec. And remember, Capitec was one of the stocks that I mentioned a while back, and I said, listen guys, I cannot understand, this stock is almost ignoring all this positives or all the negative signs in the economy, and it's just going higher. And look what happened. I mean, suddenly the stock pulled a little bit back. I can remember I showed this lamp pull formation, and the stock pulled back. And what do we see again? And another story here. There's the trend line. It's testing that trend line. It just tells you that it's still above that trend line. But when it breaks, 1,253 Rand, the stock can really collapse and maybe go back all the way, I think, to this support of, and there's the level of 1,111 Rand. I hope it answers your question, because there's a lot of things that gets influenced here. I've seen Capitec in the past, PSG Consult suddenly gets supported by 1 or 2 shares, and I know it sounds odd to you, and maybe there is some guys that can maybe push or hold the stock, but you can bet your dollar, when the market really gets collapsed or the informed capital decide to sell the stock, you cannot hold it back. Then the stock will eventually drop, and it will go to the point where there's real good value again. And on the other hand, you can get a stock hammered to pieces, and you get to a point one day when the guys say, listen, this is the level, we're buying the stock, irrespective of what, and then it's a good and proper support. Well, let's have a look at some other questions. Then the other thing was white maize. And I called the stock, well, not this stock, this instrument a while back. And I showed the viewers this beautiful positive divergence on the stochastic. I just want to say here that for the viewer that did phone me around here, and he was so desperate, he said, listen, I don't know what to do with my maize. I'm really stuck. I cannot cover my overheads. And I told him, look at this positive divergence. And the guy didn't even understand what I was saying. But what I said to him is, when you see higher lows on a stochastic, you'll probably see a bounce. And what happened? I mean, we saw a beautiful inverse head and shoulder. There's this beautiful inverse and shoulder. There's the left shoulder. There's the head. There's the right shoulder. And what happened? If we do the same projection here from the bottom, from the head to the neckline, and we project it to the top. Well, yesterday it closed at exactly 2,939 Rand, and the full target will be, you can call it 3,000 Rand if this inverse head and shoulder plays out. And by the way, I want to show you, maybe some viewers didn't even realize, can you see this? There was just a small little, you can almost say a line there. And I call this what we call a dash candle. And that just means that the instrument, like in the case of maize, that can go up limits or down, and the limit for this little dash candle was 100 Rand. So what happened? The instrument closed the day before that on 2,839, and then suddenly 100 Rand up, and you just get this candle. And this is just a candle almost of indecision. Nobody knows what to do. But what happens is, when a share actually opens up, or in the case of an instrument like a soft commodity, opens up with a maximum price, and everybody wants to buy, you will probably see that you end up with a dash candle. And that's quite interesting. You don't see it a lot. There was another one. And where we talk sometimes in shares, we talk about these little, you can almost say horizontal line, that there's no liquidity. In actual fact, with maize or some of the soft commodities, that is not true, because yesterday there was a lot of volume traded on in white maize. I think that was almost 1,000 contracts, and it didn't move. The price was just locked at the top, at that maximum price. Okay, well, let's have a look at the Rand dollar. In actual fact, another Christelle asked about the Rand dollar, and she said to me, listen, they're planning to take some money abroad, and they would like to know what we think about the Rand dollar. Well, we showed this chart before, and I kept this inverse head and shoulder because you can beautifully see that there's the left shoulder, there's the head, and there's the right shoulder. And just to tell you that sometimes an instrument or a share actually reflect the real, let's call it the real scenario. Now, this inverse head and shoulder in the Rand actually tells you that everybody is not that happy with Mr. Ramaphosa's decision on the cabinet. Why? Because we broke above this neckline. That was 14.50 Rand. We're on our way maybe to test the first level of the conservative target is 15 Rand. The high of this candle was 14.89 Rand. So we went as high as 14.89. I mean, that's 10 Rand, 10 cents from the target. But what I don't like about this inverse head and shoulder tells us that we can expect a weaker Rand. So, Christelle, we can expect a weaker rand. And can you see this red line? That's the 40-week moving average. While the rand moves above that, it actually tells you that it can weaken even further because the trend is against the rand. And while it's above this 14.50, I'm still seeing maybe we can get to 15 rand. And if it really plays out to the top, is 15 rand 57. But what does this tell us? It tells us that the informed capital is not that happy with the situation in South Africa at the moment, because the rand is always the share, what we can call, of South Africa. So if the rand performs well, the world say we like what we see and we're happy. If the rand sort of, you can say, collapses is the wrong word, but let's say struggling to go against the dollar and show a little bit of strength, it tells you that the world is nervous. And I know that some guys will say, yes, Frans, but it's all just a play out of America. Yes, it is. We're in a basket of currencies, of development, emerging market currencies, and we can easily get shoved around. But this last week, this move here was actually against the trend. Some of the other emerging market currencies almost held their own. They was a little bit resilient, but on our side, unfortunately, the rand showed some weakness. And I can always say that you can then look either into the economy, and in this case, you can look at what we've seen this week with the cabinet, and this tells me that some of the informed capital, while the rand is at 15.50, they say that we believe that things are not at 100% as they want it, either to come and invest or whatever the case may be. On the other hand, if it changes back into below 15.50, we can say 14.50, this suddenly you will see that the momentum changes, and there's some guys maybe saying, okay, we can maybe think about investing in South Africa. So this is a beautiful chart just to say that the reality and the technicals usually works hand in hand in time to come. After the break, we'll carry on.